my name's Lindsay, and thanks for watching today. Before we get started, we wanted to fill you in on our church. Here at Grace, we have a mission and a purpose. Our goal is to help people discover truth, decide on Jesus, demonstrate change, and deploy for others. If you're looking for a church, we would love for you to come and be a part of what God is doing here at Grace. You can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. We would also like to invite you to one of our Sunday morning services. Check out ohiograce.com for a list of campuses and service times in your area. We have a great time gathering for music, hanging out, and learning about who God is and how that affects our lives. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you here next week at Grace.
Well, hey, church, glad to see you guys here this morning. Hopefully you had a great Labor Day weekend last weekend. But to get going, I want to ask you a question. How many of you have ever had something in your life or experienced something in your life that seemed totally normal, but it ended up actually being bad, specifically maybe even for you? All right, does that make sense? Something that's been that's really totally normal, but it ended up being bad for you. For me, I remember in high school, for some reason, I got on this kick of drinking orange juice. When I say drinking orange juice, I mean I drank it like nonstop. I was all about the OJ, and so I would drink like over half a gallon of orange juice just each day. It was kind of like my normal thing, and so that was cool. And I'm thinking, that's like healthy. It's better than Mountain Dew, you know what I mean? And so I'm drinking orange juice, and I'm pumping my body full of vitamin C. It's gonna make me stronger. It's gonna make me faster. That's kind of thing I'm thinking. And over time, I ended up like developing these like stomach issues. Like my stomach it wasn't like there was any major thing. It just hurt, and it was just in pain. I remember one time being at a track meet, and after I had done my events, I was just at the bus, and I'm like keeled over in the seat. I'm just like in so much pain. I'm like, something is wrong with me. Something's wrong with like my stomach. And so I eventually went to the doctor, and actually all my friends, they were all making fun of me because they said, "Oh, you got kidney stones?" I had to go look that up, and I'm like, hopefully that's not it, because, and so I'm thinking that, and I remember going to the doctor, and I'm like, "Is it kidney stones?" And he's like, "Yeah, probably." But then he started asking me about my diet, and I'm like, "So, this is what I normally eat, just kind of normal stuff. I drink a lot of juice." He was like, "Hold up. All right, how about we do this? How about you just lay off the orange juice for like a week, and let's just see what happens?" I'm like, "Okay, all right, but I might need that vitamin C to, I don't know." And so I did that, and within like 48 hours, the pain like went away, like instantly. It was weird. I was like, man, who knew that too much orange juice like can mess you up? I don't know what that did to my stomach, but it like messed me up. And so it turns out that some seemingly normal things that we do once in a while, like even normal as drinking orange juice, all right, can actually at times be bad for us. It can be bad for our body, all right? It can be bad for our life. And that is true for the relationships that we have also. And so today we're going to start a new series that we're calling Toxic. And over the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about the things that we all do that really seem normal to us, and it's like kind of what society teaches us, that are actually relationship killers in our life. And so if you take a deep dive, if you think back over the years and think back over past relationships that you've had, you look back on your life, I mean, our relationships, really the conclusion that you should come to is that our relationships are broken. Like our relationships are messed up. Like we are not experts in this field. And this has been the case since the very beginning. I mean, think about it. God makes Adam and Eve, and there's only like two of them. And guess what they got? Relationship issues. Imagine that, right? Adam and Eve, they have children. You got Cain and Abel. Guess what they have? There might only be 4 people alive on the earth at this point. We're not sure, all right? But at this point, think about it. What do they have? Major relationship issues. I mean, relationship issues have been happening for generations all the way down the line to us, and we also struggle with relationships. And so if you're sitting here, I'm just saying, if you're sitting here, you're thinking, nah, man, I don't struggle with relationships. Everybody loves me. Like I'm friends with everybody. Everything's good. Either you're lying to yourself or you don't have any true friends, okay? That's just true. And see, statistically even, we have a hard time today creating good quality, meaningful, deep relationships and friendships. And really, that's because our culture has shifted. And within our culture, we have become very, very, very individualistic. I mean, think about it, right? Look back on human history. Like, throughout human history, we as people, we have needed each other, right? As recent as the 1800s, we needed to work together to survive. I mean, there was no one in the 1800s going, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hit the Oregon Trail, I'm just going to go by myself, be kind of the Lone Ranger. It's going to be awesome. Like, nobody did that because that would be the last decision that you ever make, because you don't do something like that alone. You die. You needed others to survive. And even in the early 1900s, which wasn't that long ago, like 100 years ago, even then, normal like housework and stuff and cooking and laundry, and even if you were like not living in town, even if you needed to ride into town, whatever that looked like, all right, it would take a long time. It took a lot longer to do kind of normal chores and normal work, and you kind of take the day and do it. And many times, or really even most times, you would do your work in community with others. Meaning there was like built-in time in your week that you'd be doing your work, but you were also doing it with other people in your life. And naturally, right, you would develop the friendships and you would develop relationships with people that you spent your time with. I mean, that's just kind of what naturally happens. But since then, technology has begun to shift, and over the last few decades for sure, the amount of time spent with others has drastically decreased. Drastically. I mean, maybe I should say the amount of quality time that we've spent with others has drastically decreased. And we as a society, we have drifted towards individualism, which isn't all bad. All right, there's some good things about individualism. There's some good things of like not having to work our butt off with a bunch of other people to survive. Like, we don't necessarily need each other to survive on a daily basis anymore. Like, none of us, we're not out in the fields working together. Like, oh man, if we don't have a good crop, we die this year. Like, none of us are, we don't have to worry about that type of thing. All right, what we could do instead is we could sit on our couch at home by ourselves. We could order our groceries online. All right, we could pick them up at the store. They'll even put them in your car for you. And if that's too much contact with others, that's cool. You could actually have it delivered to your house, and then you could open it up, you could throw it in the microwave, you could watch Netflix for the evening while the laundry's going in the next room without talking to anybody, right? Like, we can do this now. You don't even need others in your life to entertain you anymore like it used to be all throughout human history. Now with TVs and computers and Netflix and your phone, like, we can entertain ourselves. And along with that, as a society, we have become statistically, we have become depressed, and we have become lonely, and we have become disconnected. And I don't think our society knows how to fix it. This week I've gone through study after study after study after study, and they all basically say the same things. We are becoming more depressed, we are becoming more lonely, we are becoming more isolated, but none of the studies really explain how to fix it. It's just like, wow, this is terrible, this is horrible, really feel bad for our society, and that's it. Like, there's nothing there to how to fix it, even when we are forced to be together. It's like we've lost the ability to connect. I think there's probably no better way to think about this is like being on a plane. Okay, you know what I'm talking about? Like, I fly a few times a year, and I do something a little bit different. It's almost like a game to me. I try to be the last person on the plane, okay? Which is harder than you'd think, because there's always that straggler who comes in at last minute, and you're like, dang, that guy beat me for being last. And so what I'll do is I'll kind of hang out. I let that guy go through, and then as they're shutting the gate, I'm just like, what? Hold up, and I'm that guy. That's what I want to be. I want to be the last one on the plane, and then because of that, I'm the guy who gives the person who I'm sitting next to all the hope in the world, because they have an open seat next to them. It looks like everybody's on, and they start spreading out, like their stuff. And they're like, oh yeah, and then I'm like, sorry, buddy, I'm with you. How that is? Anyway, that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. So I don't know why I'm talking about that. So anyway, you go, and usually by the time I get on the plane, the person I'm sitting next to already has their earbuds in. They already like halfway through their movie. Like they're engaged with the TV. And I jump in, and there's like maybe we have awkward eye contact for a second, but then they're like, back to their thing. And it's interesting because there we are. There's like no acknowledgement. And sometimes, depending on where we're heading, like if I'm on a plane heading to Thailand, all right, which we do once every few years because we have our orphanages that we support there. By the way, if you haven't done it, quick commercial break. You should totally do it sometime. It's awesome. I'm just saying, okay? We go for like a couple weeks. It's crazy, but it's awesome. And so, but think about it. We go on a trip like that. I'm sitting next to somebody I don't know for like 14 hours is horrible, by the way. That's the bad part. All right. But 14 hours we're there and we don't talk to each other unless that person has to go to the bathroom. They're like, hey, can I squeeze on through? You're like, no problem. Nice to meet you. Like that. Like that's it. Like that's the extent. It's interesting. It feels like we have lost the ability, even when we're with people, even a plane full of people, we've lost the ability to connect. I saw a study this week that found that 1/3 of adults in the United States, in our country, they feel lonely. And so even that I'm thinking about, I'm like, man, sitting on the middle, sitting on the plane with 3 seats, this is what it usually is. Like, usually I'm cheap, so I'm always in the middle, which I don't appreciate, but it is what it is. But, I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right, between the 3 of us, this person and this person, like, statistically, one of us feels lonely. Like, one of us feels disconnected. One of us feels isolated from the lack of true friendship, yet we refuse to connect with those people that are around us. And instead of connecting with the people around us, like on the plane, it's like we view each other as like the enemy, especially when you land the plane and the little, seatbelt sign dings off. And what's everybody do? You all hear the unclicking of your belts, and everybody gets up into the aisle as fast as you can, even though you have about 25 more minutes of just sitting there and waiting to get off the plane. And then it's like, you're like jockeying for position. Like, hey, what about you? Hey, my bag's over there. This dude's in my way. That guy's supposed to be back there. I'm in front of him. So what's going, it's that type of thing. And then we get mad at the people in front of us that are taking so long because they're messing with the overhead bins. You get what I'm saying? Okay, we've all been there. Right? It's like we compete with each other. And so instead of connecting and living in community, we isolate ourselves and we compete with each other, and that's a problem. Just last year, the Surgeon General declared a national epidemic of loneliness and social isolation, right? Saying that this is bad for us physically. In fact, I was looking at the statistics last week. I think this was with the same report, but it was like they equated loneliness as affecting your body negatively as like smoking 12 cigarettes a day, okay, every day. And so that's what loneliness does. It's not good for us. And the more disconnected we become, the more unhealthy physically we become, and the more depressed we become. It's an issue. And our culture has been pushing us towards this issue for decades. And it's not all your fault, but it is your problem. And it's my problem. And we aren't the first people to have to deal with this problem. In fact, this was the first problem that mankind ever faced, even before sin entered the world. As we look at creation, look at Genesis chapter 1 and 2, it's interesting because God gives us kind of a detailed account of how he created earth and how he created everything around us. And you see how God creates light and then plants and sun and planets and sun and moon and the stars. And then he creates earth and he creates land and mountains and oceans and trees and plants and animals. He creates all these things. And we see his creativity throughout creation. We see how detailed that he got, and we see how huge he made everything. And it was awesome. You got the angels there. The book of Job tells us the angels, they're just shouting for joy because they'd never seen anything like that before. He's like, it's a rock. And they're like, what's a rock? We've never seen a rock before. This rock's awesome. Can you make some more rocks? The guy's like, oh yeah, no problem. Bam, more rocks. They're just going crazy because they've never seen this before. All the stuff that we're kind of used to, they're just like, wow, this is so great. And after each day, as God's creating all this stuff, after each day, he kind of reviews his creation that he made that day, and he looks at it and points down to it. He's like, and that is good. He's like creating stuff. He's like, oh, check this out. I'm creating all the plants. No one ever seen plants like this before. And he looks and he's like, man, that is good. Every single time. And the last thing that God creates is he creates something special made in his own image. He creates this man called Adam. And God looks at Adam and he just doesn't say, wow, Adam, this is good. He looks at Adam and he says, this is very good. But then right after he calls Adam, not just good, but very good, he says about Adam's situation, he says, but it is not good. Check this out. It is not good for the man to be alone. He says, this is not a good situation. He says, so I will make him a helper corresponding to him. So very quickly after Adam was created, God declares that this isn't good, that this is not good. His situation is not good for Adam to be alone. Now, think about it. Was Adam technically alone? Was he? No. There was animals, right? Like some of us sitting here, we're like, well, what I really like to do is I really like to hang out at home at night with my cats, and I'm not alone because I got my cats, all right? If that's you, I'm just saying, Adam had cats too, all right? Adam had cool cats that didn't hate you like all the other cats that live now do. This was before the fall, so cats were cool at that point, I'm imagining. And so, he had all the cats in the world, literally, at his fingertips. He had all the animals, yet this still wasn't a good situation. By the way, not only did Adam have all the animals, and he could have whatever pet he possibly wanted. You know who else he had? This guy called God, right? He also had God with him, and he had a relationship with God. I mean, think about it. He had talked to God face to face. I mean, they had conversations with each other. And so he also had God. But here's God. He looks at Adam's situation and says, wow, Adam's got all the animals. All right, that's cool. There's no sin in the world. Adam also has me. But he says, but his situation is just not good for him. Right? This is not enough for Adam. See, what was good for Adam? It was to have a relationship with someone who is like him, to be able to connect with someone who is on his level. And so God made Eve. And so from the very, very beginning, we see that we are designed to do life together. We were designed from the beginning to have meaningful relationships. We were designed to have friends. We even see this in Jesus' life. I mean, think about Jesus. We all know Jesus, right? Okay, all right. That was super confident. Freaking me out a little bit. All right, Jesus, God wrapped in a human body, comes down to earth for 30, 35 years, something like that, and lives a perfect life, right? Jesus, when God comes down and he kind of visits us for a few decades, what's he do? He surrounds himself with people. He surrounded himself with friends. He had a community of people that Jesus did life with. See, we need relationships and we need community. I mean, that's a fact. One time, 2,000 years ago, a guy named Paul, he tried to explain our need for community in this way. This is what he says in 1 Corinthians. He says, now you, by the way, who's you? You're you. All right, there we go. You guys are getting it. The Jesus thing threw me off, but now you guys have got it. All right, he says, now you, all right, that's us, that's me, that's you. He says, you are the body of Christ and individual members of it. See, this is what he's saying. He's saying, hey, if you have given your life to Jesus, and if you have made that decision to hand your life over to him, or really, I think the best word is, if you have surrendered your life to him at some point in your life. By the way, if you haven't, you should totally do that today because you aren't guaranteed tomorrow. God came down, lived a perfect life, and he died for your sins because you're messed up and you're screwed up just like the rest of us in here, and your sins needed paid for. And so he paid for that so that you could have the real relationship, the true relationship that you were actually created to have, right? And so you should get that taken care of. You should surrender your life to him. There's no one who loves you more. And so here's what he's saying. He's saying if you've given your life to Jesus, like if you've made that decision, he says you are a part of a bigger thing. Okay, you are the church. See, in our culture, we view church as like the building. We're like, oh yeah, that's my church. Oh, I'm going to the church. I'm going to drive to church. You know, that's kind of what we say. All right, that's not how the Bible describes church. Actually, it's not what the word church technically means. The church is not the building. All right, this building that we're in, weird, tall, weird-shaped building. All right, this is just a tool for us. All right, that's all it is. It's a tool. We're not all about our buildings. It's simply a tool to reach people. All right, the church isn't this structure. The church is you. The church is us, all right? The church is the people, a group of people who have a real relationship with Jesus, who come together and do life together. That is what the church is, and that's most of you, right? Not probably every single one of us in this room, but that's most of us. You, me, we are a part of it. We, he says, are members of it. Now, you might not feel like you're a part of it. You might not even want to be a member of it, but you are. That's how he has made it. See, a few verses before, Paul, he kind of illustrates it this way. He says, indeed, he says, the body is not one part, but many. See, he's like, think about, okay, all right, it's Paul, he's like writing there, and he's like, all right, think about this, okay. Think of the church. He says the church is kind of like a body, right? Like a human body. You think of your body, you got all a bunch of different parts, right? You got fingers, you got toes, you got arms, you got elbows, you got ears, you got all these parts of the body, and it's made up of a bunch of different parts. And we're like, okay, we totally get that. And then Paul's like, I don't know if you do. All right, so we're going to go back to kindergarten real quick. And so here he goes. He tries to make this as basic as possible. He's like, okay, boys and girls, you ready? Okay. He says, if the foot, all right, everybody real quick, look at your foot. Can you do that real quick? All right, so he gets a close look, okay? All right, look at your foot. He says, if the foot should say, now if your foot says anything, you got bigger problems I don't know how to handle, okay? But he's saying, if the foot should say, wow, because I'm not a hand, man, I really wish I was a hand. A hand would be so much better. And it's probably right. I'd rather be a hand than a foot, I think. He says, because I'm not a hand, I don't belong to the body. I don't want to be a part of this body. He says, it is not for that reason any less part of the body. He says, like if your foot, the foot that you just looked at, hypothetically, right? If your foot looks at the other parts of your body, it's like, wow, I want to do what I want to do, and I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And so right now, I feel like being a hand. I want to be a hand. That's what I want to be. And if I can't be a hand, I'm out. I don't want to play this game. I don't want to be a part of this body. It's kind of like that friend in elementary school and around the neighborhood growing up who, if he didn't get his way, then he just didn't want to play the game, right? So he packed up all his stuff and went home. Remember that kid? All right, kind of like that kid. All right, that's what your foot is doing right now, being that kid. And so what Paul's saying, he's like, if the foot says, wow, I don't like you, so I'm not going to be a part of this body anymore. I don't want anything to do with your body. The other parts of the body, they're going to be like looking at the foot like, yo, foot, too bad, foot. Like, you still are. Like, you're a part of the body, whether you want to be or not. It's like acting like you aren't part of the body does not make you not part of the body. Like, the other parts of the body are looking at the foot. They're like, hey, foot, like, you're still attached to us. Sorry, bro. Like, you're just going to have to live with it. This is just the way that it is. And so Paul, here he is. He says it's the same thing with any other part of the body. He says, think about the ear, boys and girls. He says, if the ear should say, wow, I really wish I was an eye, an eye would be so much better. And it probably would be better, right? I think I'd rather be an eye. He says, because I'm not an eye, I don't belong to the body. I don't want any part with this body. I want free of this body. He's like, it's not for that reason any less part of the body. It's attached, right? It's still a part of it. And so if the whole body were an eye, Paul's saying, where would the hearing be? If the whole body was one part, it wouldn't be a body. It'd be that one part. You wouldn't be able to hear. You wouldn't be good. Like you could see, really well, I'm assuming. But you wouldn't be able to hear. You wouldn't be able to smell. You couldn't do anything. Or if the whole body were an ear, where would your sense of smell be? You wouldn't be able to smell because you wouldn't have a nose, because you would all be ear, okay? It's an issue. But as it is, he's saying God has arranged each one of the parts in the body just as he wanted. And if there were all the same part, there would be, where would the body be? There would be no body. It would just be a pile of parts. He says, as it is, there are many parts, right? He's describing the church body, what we are, our church. He's describing us as like a body. He's like, there are many parts, and not only are we attached to each other, but God has actually made us different. We are individual. We are different parts, but we're all part of one body, meaning we are all together. Basically, he's saying, hey, guess what? I got some bad news, but it's actually not bad news. It's actually pretty good news. You guys are stuck with each other. That's what he's saying. Even if you don't want to be stuck with them, it's too bad. You're stuck with each other. And so real quick, look around. All right, look around real quick. All right, awkward contact's okay. Make it weird. That's cool. I'm all about that. All right? Like, I know we're not much, but like you're stuck with us. We are together part of the same team. We are together part of the same family. We are, as Paul would describe it, as we are a body. And each one of us, we're all very different. We all have different gifts and abilities. God has made us different. He did that, by the way, on purpose, and it's actually better that way. But each one of us, we are to be a part of this community, this thing called the church. And in order to do that, we need to be engaged. Right? We need to be engaged. We need to be building relationships with each other and serving God together and working for Jesus with each other and doing life together. But many of us, the honest truth is, we're not. Like we just aren't. I mean, I get all of us here this morning, like we're here. So you get some brownie points for that. All right, so you're somewhat engaged. By the way, where's the camera? If you're watching online, I just want to say, yeah, that's not church. Okay, it's not church because you're not with anybody. And by the way, if you are watching online, you should probably go listen to some better pastor, all right, who can feed you. Like if that's what it's all about, go listen to somebody else. There's way better people than me, all right? You should be here, all right, working and building relationships with each other, right? All of us that are in this room today, we're here, so we're somewhat engaged, but many of us, we park in the same parking spot, roughly. We come through the same doors each week. We fill up the same kind of coffee. We come in, we sit in basically the same spot. We say hi to the same guy, and then after the service, we bolt and we leave, and we repeat the next week. Like that's what we do, right? Like you're here, I give you a little credit for that, but you're not engaged. And because of that, you are missing out on relationships and friendships and community that you are actually, again, like Adam and Eve, you were created to have. You are missing out on what you were designed to have. And you might be learning more about God, which is good. Like I'm pro learning about God, okay? Don't get me wrong, all right? But you're not rubbing shoulders with each other, and you're not rubbing shoulders with other believers. You're not being challenged by others. You're not being pushed by others, and you are missing out on joy, and you're missing out on the fun that relationships bring. And you might be here, but the reality is you're doing life alone. You actually need the relationships of the people sitting around you in this room. You need them. We need each other. Paul says, the eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. Meaning you can't say to someone over here, I don't need you. I don't want to be a part of you. I don't want you in my group. You can't say that because we're all attached to each other, whether we like it or not. Or again, the head can't say to the feet, wow, I don't need you. And Paul's like, no, the head needs the feet. Like that's a key part of the body. We need each other. See, I've talked to a lot of people that they're like, you know, a lot of times I'll invite someone to church or whatever, and they're like, well, I'm a Christian, you know, but I just don't feel like I need to go to church to worship God. And I just want to say, well, that's dumb, okay? Because it is. Right? Like, sure, you can worship God in different ways. You don't need to be here to do that. We should be doing that really all week by ourselves and with other people. We should be doing that all the time. All right? But basically what those people are saying, or maybe this is you. Maybe you thought this at one point in your life. Maybe you feel like you still think this. All right? But basically what you're saying is, I don't feel like I need the community to grow in faith. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable, I feel like. It's like, yeah, you got God, and you know, if you're working on it, then I think you'll be all right. But the only problem is, it's just not what the Bible teaches. It's just not what God says. See, we are not meant to do life alone, and it is not good for us to do life alone. Not good, is what he said. Meaning you need this family, you need this community just like I do. He says God was actually the one, by the way, who put the body together. All right, who put the body together? God. Who put us together? God. All right, God. All right, it's not Zach's idea. Like, hey, we should do this thing called church. Great idea, Zach. No, that's not how it worked, okay? God, this whole church thing, and so I tell those people, I'm like, by the way, didn't know if you knew this or not, but church was God's idea, all right? This is God's thing, not ours. And so he says, so this was God's idea, and he put us together so that, here's the reason, so that there would be no division. That, by the way, means, for some of you, you're struggling with this, that means you get along with each other. Imagine that. God wants us to like each other, okay? He wants us to get along with each other. He says there should be no division in the body, but that the members would have the same concern for each other, meaning we should care for each other. It's kind of a big deal. And so if one member suffers, guess what? All the members suffer with it. And if one member is honored, guess what? All the members rejoice with it. Here he is, he's saying our relationships and our friendships here at church, he's saying we are to share in life. And when tragedy hits somebody, which it will, tragedy is going to hit you someday. You're going to get the call in the middle of the night. The words cancer, the words divorce, all these, they all are going to enter our life at some point. We're going to hear tragedy hits, that's life. But we have a group of people, we have a family that help each other get through those tragedies. All right, we have, and on the flip side, like what he's saying, if something good happens to somebody, well, we are all happy for, or we should be, right? We should be share in the celebration of, wow, I'm so happy for you. I'm so glad that happened, whatever that might be. See, too many of us, what we do, instead of helping each other and helping the people around us and helping each other grow in our relationship with God, we spend the majority of our time at home in isolation. We do exactly what the world around us is doing, and we ignore the need of community and relationships and friends. And we have all these excuses kind of rattling around in our head. We're like, well, but I'm an introvert. Okay, all right. Or I'm just not a people person. All right, and I get that. Like I feel like that sometimes. I feel like there's definitely times in my life where I'm just like, I just do not feel like there's times where I'll get a text of some people here at church, and they're just like, hey, we're going to do this at this time. You should come. And, there's times where I'm just like, man, I got stuff going on. Like, I got some things I need to do tonight. There's almost for me, sometimes it just kind of feels like work. Not every time, not even most of the time, but sometimes I'm just like, man, this is like work. I got to go be with these people. You know what I mean? And what I've had to do and I do this on purpose, is sometimes I force myself to go do these things. And I have a good time. And guess what? You know why I force myself to do these things? It's because it's good for me. It is good for me to spend time with other believers. I need that in my life. It's good for me. And if you're not a people person, or if you're an introvert, if you're like, I don't know, homebody or whatever you call yourself, all right, the world will tell you, hey, guess what? That's totally okay. All right, good for you. If it's you and a bottle of wine sitting on your couch at night, whatever it might be, if that's you, the world tells us that's totally fine. You do you, whatever makes you happy. But then on the flip side, you got to remember that that's the same world who's telling you, yeah, you should go do that. You should isolate yourself if that's what makes you happy. It's the same world that is getting more depressed and getting more isolated and getting more lonely. Is that really who you want to be listening to? All right, and then you got God here. He's saying, yeah, doing that. That's not good for you. Not saying never rest. He's saying you need to be intentional about building relationships with the people around you. God's saying, I want something so much better for you. God's saying, it is not good for you to be alone. The author of Hebrews says it this way. He says, let us consider one another in order to provoke love and good works. Sounds very Bible right there, right? God's saying, hey, you should encourage each other to love each other, and you should encourage each other to do a bunch of good things, okay? We all get that. We're all like, all right, I knew that was in the Bible somewhere. He says, and not neglecting to gather together. It's almost he's saying like, hey, you see what we're doing here? We're all gathering together here on a Sunday morning at 11:30, He's like, see what we're doing here? I know you're busy. And I know you got stuff going on, and I know you got life happening outside these walls. But God's saying, it's almost like he's saying, but under no circumstance, never neglect this, because you need this. And not only do you need this, but the people need you here. We need each other. Don't neglect this, he's saying. And then he says, as some are in the habit of doing, but encourage each other. See, isolation doesn't just happen. It slowly grows in our life. It becomes, a habit. That's all it is. It becomes a habit. Now, I was thinking about this week. Work with me here for just a second, okay? It's kind of like weeds, okay? How many guys struggle with, all summer, it's like weeds in your, lawn and, in your, you get what I'm saying? Okay, around rocks and stuff. Landscaping, that's the word I was looking for. In your landscaping and things, it's like a battle. It's like a constant battle. You're like, man, these things just keep popping up. And you're pulling them from the roots. You're trying to do everything. And it's just super annoying. Anyway, it's normal to have weeds. At least at my house it is. Maybe your house is pure, okay, but my house is not, okay? But generally, what do we try to do? We try to remove the weeds from our yard, or we try to remove the weeds from our landscaping. Like, that's kind of normal. Just like, by the way, we should remove the isolation from our life. Like, it's a normal thing. They pop up. We want to be isolated a lot of times. We want to be alone, which isn't bad all the time, but if that's kind of our lifestyle, that's not good for us. And then here, it's kind of like the weed in the sense that if you let it go in your life, what happens? If you let weeds grow or go, they grow, right? They get bigger and bigger and bigger. The whole thing gets uglier and uglier and uglier, and it starts to take over. This summer, I had this, there's a side of my house that I really don't go on much, and because it faces my neighbors. Sorry, my neighbors. But there's this so we try to hit the weeds I don't know, twice a year. It's not good. We should do that more. But anyway, there was this weed that started off small next to our house, and it just kept growing. It ended up being in July. I remember I went and checked it out. It was too big for me to weed whack. And I'm like, okay, this is a big thing. All right, what is this? And I brought it for you. Actually, I brought a third of it here to show you guys how big I grew this weed. I can't really grow a garden, but I could grow weeds really well. And in between first service, Blaine threw it in the dumpster. And this is all I got left. But, yeah. So anyway, you can at least see the trunk of this weed. It's pretty big, right? All right? This thing was 8 foot tall. It covered up one of our windows at home. This thing was huge. And what's interesting is this giant weed, I cut it down on Friday. I cut the thing down, and it's interesting because as I'm driving by now, I noticed that it's not there. I'm like, man, our house is so bare on that side. We need the weed back. That weed really makes the house look, something there. But that's what happens when we let isolation grow in our life. You let isolation go, and it gets more and more prominent in our life. It grows. Right? It gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it becomes a habit. And not only that, but check this out. We get used to it. And it's just well, that's just what we do. We don't have friends anymore, and that's okay. That's kind of what we think. Or we're well, I don't really see them much anymore, but that's fine because I got life, and I'm busy doing other things. I'm busy doing other things just by myself or just with my family. And here we are. It's it grows to this bigger and bigger and bigger thing, and it ends up becoming a habit in our life. That's not good for us. See, God has designed our church to meet our need for community in our life. It's the design of it, right? And many of us, we go to church, and you're here, and that's cool. I'm glad you're here. But you're not engaged. And it's really time to re-engage. The first thing you got to do is go, right? That makes sense? All right, you should go. All of you guys get the check mark on that, all right? We're good with that. You should be here, all right? But more than that, really, you should get involved with what's going on here. Right? Get involved. There's two ways. You can get involved with serving. You're going to meet people doing that, right? And you should be serving anyway. But you could also get involved with our groups and the other things that we got going on. We got women's groups on Sunday morning and Sunday night and Monday and Wednesday. We got women's groups all week. It seems like. We also got men's groups throughout the week. We got Mike's class on Wednesday nights, which is awesome. By the way, this Wednesday we're going through our Grow class, and specifically this Wednesday we're going to be talking about the New Testament and walking through that together and just kind of explaining that within an hour. All right, we're going to attempt to do that within an hour and kind of go through that. It's just good stuff, and it's not even just learning together. It's the fact that we are together. You get what I'm saying? It's good for us, and we're all different, and that's by design. And we fit each other. We fit each other in a specific way that we as a church, we need you. We need you in our men's Bible studies. We need you in our women's classes. We need you to serve. And without you, the rest of us are missing out. See, we are to live life in community. We are to do life together. And if you're a Christian, which isn't everybody in this room, but hopefully it's most of us, your church, this group, these people right here, is the main way that we feel connected. And so just like isolation was not good for Adam, isolation is not good for us. And it's toxic to our relationships. In fact, it's a relationship killer. We'll talk more about more relationship killers next week. Let's pray. God, we thank you for this. God, we thank you for relationships. This was your idea. And it's so much better that we have each other. You set it up that way. And God, we thank you for that. God, we ask that you would help push us to spend time with each other and to develop relationships with each other. God, that's what you've designed us before. We're not to do life alone. And we have you, we know that, but we also have each other. Seems like so many of us, we just ignore that. And it's not good for us. And it's not good for others. Lord, we thank you. We ask you to help us on this. We ask in Jesus' name, amen. All right, we will see you guys next Sunday, and we hope that you have a good week.
Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you here next week at Grace.